Welcome to the Exam Room Live, brought to you by the Physicians Committee. Hi, I am the weight loss champion, Chuck Carroll, and this is the healthiest half hour anywhere online today. Appreciate you joining us right here on Facebook and on YouTube. Today's show, we're going to be dipping into the thyroid. So many questions come in with viewers about this. You know, you're doing everything right, you're exercising, but the scale, it just doesn't want to budge. So there is good news because Dr. Neil Barnard is here to talk all about it. Dr. Barnard, this is a big one. I'm sure a lot of people are going to be looking forward to this conversation.
It is one that a lot of people miss. We're going to get them on track.
And of course, he's also going to be sticking around to take your questions when we open up the doctor's mailbag. So go ahead, drop yours in the comment section now, or send them to us on Twitter or Instagram using the hashtag ExamRoomLive. But before we go any further, let's get you caught up on what happened over the long weekend. Here are your health headlines for Tuesday, September 8th, 2020. It was indeed a cruel summer for the coronavirus, despite some early predictions that the warm weather could cause the pandemic to essentially fizzle out. Instead, the number of infections in the U.S. nearly quadrupled between Memorial Day and Labor Day, while the death toll almost doubled. Those statistics, according to the Washington Post. Heading into the unofficial start of fall, the total number of cases stands at more than 6.3 million. 189,000 people have now lost their lives. In other news, Formula One driver Lewis Hamilton says he's been able to offset the carbon footprint created by his racing career, one that dates all the way back to 2007. The six-time series champion credits eating a plant-based diet for a big part of the positive impact. He says he also tries to drive electric cars whenever not at the track, and that he's committed to using his platform to educate others about the way their lifestyle and diet also impact the environment. And finally, today, there is new hope for low-income adults suffering from obesity. Doctors in Louisiana say they may have cracked the code for not only losing weight, but keeping it off despite economic barriers that may exist. In a study of more than 800 adults, a group given intensive lifestyle interventions lost 10 times more weight than those who received just the usual care. The more successful group received in-person or phone sessions with a health coach, education on portion sizes and healthy eating, plus they were given a scale to weigh themselves. And with obesity being tied to at least 13 deadly forms of cancer, as well as heart disease, diabetes, and other chronic issues, one researcher says, quote, "The significance of this study cannot be overstated." And Dr. Barnard, before we move on, I want to bring you into this conversation because what really strikes me here is that the people in the study, a lot of them didn't even have a scale to weigh themselves. I mean, we're talking about significant limited means and probably also never had the opportunity to have a conversation with any medical professional about a proper diet and what that looks like. And I know recently we saw a similar pattern as far as educating people with limited means and the success that they've had with our Fight COVID-19 with Food series. So a little conversation can go a long way here, it seems.
Yeah, that's right. A little information really can go a long way. And keep in mind, there are a lot of pervasive myths that have been there in the nutritional world. And for some people, they have these myths have been persisting since the 1950s and 60s. For example, you need to have meat in your diet. You need it for protein. And so if a person thinks, well, gee, if I'm not eating meat, I won't get enough protein. What are they doing? They're including meat in their diet. They're teaching their kids to have this food. Well, there is protein in meat, but there's a whole lot of fat and a whole lot of cholesterol along with it. And so as your blood cholesterol rises, and as the scale looks more and more unfriendly because of all the fat that you're consuming, people think, gee, I'm eating right. What's the problem? Or you need to have dairy for calcium. Okay, fair enough, let's have that. But there's dairy fat, there's dairy sugar, and as you're gaining weight and having problems or digestive issues and whatever, people tend not to know the answers to these things. So we have to unlearn some of these old things that have turned out not to really be factual. And nutrition information also means learning about what to eat. Beans and vegetables and fruits and whole grains. So a little education goes a long way. Also knowing your numbers is an important part of that education. For some folks, they have felt that as long as I'm feeling okay, my weight might not hurt me too much. And then when a person actually, as you were saying, gets a scale, maybe goes online, you can go on our website and look at the your body mass index, BMI calculator, and you'll be able to know if your weight is in the unhealthy range. Once you have those numbers, that can motivate you to want to then put what you're learning to work. And then the final thing, I think, is you just have to have some ideas of what to actually prepare in the kitchen or to choose at a restaurant or at a fast food. Once people have had a chance to test out some new things, then that really allows you to put your knowledge to work.
All right. And for me, it basically comes down to how can a person possibly be expected to succeed when given just that vague prescription for eat better and exercise? They don't know what better is. And if somebody doesn't know that, how in the world can they possibly be expected to succeed? And really, so I'm really grateful to the study and the work that we've done with the Fight COVID-19 with Food series, because that's all this is about. It's about education and giving people the tools that they need to succeed.
Chuck, you're absolutely right. People will go to many doctors' offices these days, and the doctor will say, okay, your cholesterol is up, or your blood pressure is up, or your diabetes isn't under such good control. Are you eating right? And what does that mean? It's so vague. You really need to bring in the specific nutrition information. What is a plant-based diet? What is a vegan diet? What does it mean to limit oils? What does it mean to choose healthier foods? You have to have some information, and frankly, that's why here at the Barnard Medical Center, we have registered dietitians to spend some time with people to plan out their menu and help the patient and the patient's family to get on a better track with good information.
Absolutely. And you can make an appointment at the Barnard Medical Center by visiting barnardmedical.org or by calling 202-527-7500. You see the phone number on the screen right there. Donna is very quick today in the director's chair. Okay, Dr. Barnard, let's move on and get to the main event for the show. Here's something that's frustrating, okay? You and I were just talking about this before we went live. A person is exercising. They think that they're eating right, but they're still not feeling all that great. And the scale certainly isn't moving. I mean, this thing is just stuck. And a lot of people, so many people go through this and they think that it's just part of life. Like it's something that they have to deal with, but really it could be something very specific that they could be approaching. And you think in a lot of cases, it could actually be the thyroid. So let's talk a little bit about the thyroid. What is this and why is it causing the scale to freeze? This is just such a big deal.
It's a huge deal. So many people are either, frankly, hypothyroid, or they're just kind of on the borderline. The doctor's not too sure what to do about it. But the way you feel it is just exactly what you were saying. You get up in the morning, you stand on the scale, and you think, how can this be? After all my effort, I'm not losing any weight, or your weight is going up a pound, and your energy is not so hot, and you don't feel like yourself. So let's do Thyroid 101. I want to share my screen with you. The healthy thyroid, it oversees your body's use of energy. So what if I'm hypothyroid? Okay, there's the thyroid gland. It's sort of shaped like a butterfly. It's at the base of your neck. You can barely even feel it there in your neck, but it's there. And it's going to send thyroid hormone to all the cells of your body to give them energy. So let's say I'm hypothyroid. I'm kind of low on the gas, so to speak. I'll feel weak. I'll feel easily fatigued. And you'll tend to feel cold. Other people in the room will think, I'm all right, but you don't feel well. You feel cold, your digestive tract is shutting down, and then there's that weight gain coming in, but your mood is shutting down as well. You're feeling kind of depressed and crummy, and if you look in the mirror, you think, my skin isn't right. My hair seems kind of dry. What's going on here? Okay, now the opposite can happen. Hyperthyroidism means you've got too much thyroid hormone. Hypothyroidism means too little thyroid hormone. Hyperthyroidism, too much. And for the most part, you see weight loss that you didn't intend. Once in a while, you'll see somebody who's had weight gain when they're hyperthyroid. That's a little unusual, but it can happen. And now your pulse is speeding up, or it's irregular. Your thought processes are kind of on edge. You're nervous, you're irritable. And now hypothyroid, cold, hyperthyroid, warm. You might have a tremor, have trouble sleeping, and again, your hair doesn't seem right. Okay, it's funny that a little organ like that can do all of these things, but it sure can. So let's dig into the weeds a little bit. This is thyroid hormone. Can you see this? Okay, see those big purple dots there? That's iodine. And you need iodine to make thyroid hormone. So why would anybody ever be low? Well, in 1924, the Morton Company started selling iodized salt. It's the blue canister with a girl with the umbrella on it. Okay, they've added a little iodine to salt. And I got to tell you, that really pretty much eliminated iodine deficiency in the United States. Not every country has iodized salt, but the United States does. And you only need 150 micrograms of iodine a day so that your thyroid has what it needs. So how could you go wrong? Well, we are modern people, and so I might have sea salt or Himalayan salt or kosher salt that may not be iodized, if it's not labeled as such, then it's not. And so as time goes on, you're stepping on the scale and you're gaining some weight and your energy is not so hot and you're just low in thyroid. You're low in iodine, so your thyroid gland can't make it and you're hypothyroid. Worldwide, that's the biggest reason for being hypothyroid, is just a lack of iodine. So you can get it through iodized salt. Now you might be thinking, well, I don't want to have salt in my diet. You don't need much. If you have even about maybe a quarter or a third of a teaspoon of iodized salt, that will add to the iodine in your diet. So you don't need a huge amount. And you actually do need some sodium in your diet. About 1,500 milligrams a day would be normal for people to have. So a zero sodium diet you don't want. Now, the dairy industry will say, well, there is iodine in dairy products. That's true. But once you find out how it got there, you might not want to choose that source. A cow's udder can get dragged through the mud. It can get tainted with feces, or milk can get all crusted over it. And so the dairy industry will, on a routine basis, use a disinfectant that gets painted on the teats of the udder. And it contains iodine. And so some of that disinfectant, which has the iodine, will get into the milk as a contaminant. And so it carries the iodine with it. So one of the big reasons why milk has iodine in it is it's part of the disinfectant that was used on the cows, not the best source. Cows are also sometimes supplemented with iodine, but they don't actually make it. But I got to tell you, my favorite source is sea vegetables, or as we used to call them when I was growing up, seaweed. So let's say you go to a sushi bar. Don't have the fish sushi unless you're very well insured, but you have a cucumber roll or an asparagus roll or a sweet potato roll or something like that. That nori seaweed that it's wrapped in, that nori is loaded with healthy iodine. Okay, now also wakame. You got some miso soup, the little strips of wakame seaweed, very high in iodine as well. And in my book, Your Body in Balance, I have a recipe for aramay cucumber salad. If you never have had aramay, you really have to try this. It's at every health food store, every Asian food store. It's an extremely fine, delicate seaweed. And you slice some cucumbers really thin, put a little tiny bit of salt on them, and then put some soaked aramay on top, just a tiny bit, and a little seasoned rice vinegar. It's the most just very light, delightful salad. So the point here is that a lot of Americans aren't familiar with sea vegetables. We just, it's not something you have in Omaha or Fargo where I grew up. But when you get to know them, you're getting iodine. If you're missing all of that, you can get iodine supplements at the store. Often they are sold as kelp. Kelp is a seaweed, and sometimes it's a little drop, sometimes it's a little pill, and it will typically contain around the 150 micrograms that you need, and there you go. So, as I mentioned, worldwide, the biggest reason why people are low in thyroid is they're not getting iodine. In the United States, most people are getting iodine, but they're still having thyroid problems. What's the issue for them? The issue for them is antibodies. Antibodies are proteins. They're made in your body to attack viruses and to attack bacteria and to knock them out. For some reason, your body is making antibodies that are attacking your thyroid gland. And this will not be on the test, but there are several different antibodies that doctors can test for you. And if they discover that you've got antibodies to your thyroid, some of them will make the thyroid gland not function very well. Some antibodies attack the control mechanism, so the thyroid can't turn off. And now, because of antibodies, your thyroid is running overtime and you end up hyperthyroid. So the diagnostic names, if you've got antibodies attacking your thyroid and shutting it down, That's Hashimoto's thyroiditis, most common reason for low thyroid in the United States. It was named after a Dr. Hashimoto in Japan. If your thyroid gland can't turn off because antibodies are keeping it from turning off, that's called Graves' disease. And it doesn't mean it's a particularly grave disease. It was named after a Dr. Robert Graves. And that's a very common reason for hyperthyroidism. Okay, so can foods affect this? Yes, remember what I was saying. Antibodies are forming against your thyroid gland. Foods may be the trigger for it. At the Adventist Health Study 2, which had almost 66,000 people in it, they discovered that vegans had the least risk for hypothyroidism and lacto-ovo vegetarians, people who are not eating meat, but they're making up for it with cheese, ice cream, milk, other dairy products. They were at the highest risk of hypothyroidism. And look at hyperthyroidism. Vegans, again, do the best. People who are omnivores, in other words, they're eating meat and dairy and eggs, they have dramatically more hyperthyroidism than other people. So what we suspect is happening is that your body is seeing proteins that are coming from meat, from dairy products, maybe from eggs, thinking that these are proteins coming from a virus, making antibodies to them, and those antibodies end up attacking your thyroid gland. So why do vegans do better? Because they're not consuming those kinds of proteins. And so their body is not reacting. That's what we think is happening. Is it true? There was a good case control study back in 2017. They looked at people who had thyroid antibodies and they compared them to healthy controls. And what they found is yes, people who ate more vegetables and legumes, meaning beans, dried fruits, nuts, and muesli for some reason, these tended to mean they were less likely to develop antibodies. But if you ate a lot of butter, animal fats, that sets you up for having these antibodies. So what we think is happening is that animal products are inflammatory. They're causing this attack on the thyroid, and plant foods can be anti-inflammatory, partly because they don't have the animal proteins in it, partly because they have antioxidants and healthy omega-3s. All right, let me just finish. I want to share with you some success stories. This is Mike. Mike is a neurosurgeon in North Carolina, 52 years old. He was in good health. And around age 45, his TSH was climbing. Now, what is TSH? TSH is thyroid stimulating hormone. If your thyroid is sluggish, your body makes more TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone, to get it going. It's trying to push it. And so you want it to be below 4. Some doctors would say even lower than that. His was 4.2, that's too high. And it eventually climbed to 5.1. So he began a plant-based diet. What happened? His TSH fell from 5.1 down to 2.9, and he started feeling a lot better. He lost 7 or 8 pounds. He had increased energy. In other words, that sluggish thyroid gland was getting repaired, working again, so his body didn't need to push it with more TSH. The healthy diet was getting him going. Okay, this is Wendy. Now, if Mike had hypothyroidism, Wendy was the opposite. She was 47. She started having reduced sleep. Somehow her weight started coming up. She felt hyper. And her mood was like it was on grease. She wasn't herself. Her doctor said, you've got low TSH. Low thyroid stimulating hormone means that your thyroid is working overtime. And she had the thyroid antibodies, and she had classic hyperthyroidism. Well, she was in New York. She went to hear a lecture by a doctor about plant-based diets. She decided to try it. She went vegan and also went gluten-free, and she went home. She was doing this diet, and she checked her thyroid gland again. She went to the doctor's office, got a blood test, and was waiting for the results, and the phone never rang. She finally called the doctor's office and said, I want my lab results. And the doctor's office said, well, we only call you if there's a problem. She said, but I have a problem. I'm hyperthyroid. And the doctor's office said, no, you're not. You're totally normal. In other words, she went on a healthy diet. Her thyroid completely returned to absolutely normal. This is Jean. Jean's 59 years old. She was a teacher. She was fatigued. She was overweight. She had fatty liver. Her TSH, you can see that's a little bit up, meaning her body's trying to get that thyroid going. She began a plant-based diet. Off came the weight, 100-pound weight loss. Now, this was interesting, though. During the weight loss, initially her TSH actually started getting worse. It started climbing, and then it started to normalize. What's going on? What we think is happening is that when you've got a lot of body fat stored, it stores toxins. Toxins are fat soluble in some cases. So as the weight comes off, the toxins get into your bloodstream, poisoning the thyroid gland, but eventually it resolved with the weight loss. Okay. This is Nancy. Nancy was 49 years old. She was an accountant. She was hypothyroid at age 19, treated with levothyroxine. She was overweight. She was tired, sensitive to cold. She learned, coincidentally, her weight was 265 and so was her cholesterol. Those are both not good numbers. However, Nancy heard about a plant-based diet. Her weight fell to 150. Her cholesterol fell to about the same number. She's on a roll. She's doing great. Her physician stopped her thyroid medication, and she has a totally normal thyroid gland now, feeling great. And she's got energy there. She is starting her 5K. So what have we seen? We've seen that you've got a thyroid gland that wants to keep you healthy, but it can't do it unless you got iodine in your diet. Iodized salt can do it. Sea vegetables can do it. If you want to, you can take a pill, but hopefully you don't need that. And getting away from the animal products to a healthy plant-based diet is going to, we believe, reduce the likelihood that antibodies will form and get your thyroid off kilter. So there you have it, Chuck. That's a healthy thyroid.
That is indeed a healthy thyroid, and a lot of information. Thank you so much. It never ceases to amaze me how many viewers have written in over the course of not just the Exam Room Live, but the Exam Room podcast now over the last 3 years asking about the thyroid. It's really eye-opening to me how many people actually have issues with this.
It is to me too. And so when I was writing Your Body in Balance, as you know, the book is all about sex hormones and the insulin hormone for diabetes. But I wanted to include a lot of information for people who have thyroid symptoms, because for so many people, it can be something as vague as my mood is not good. When I was 16, I felt great, but now I'm 36, 46, 56, 66, whatever it is. I'm not myself. I'm just sluggish. I've got no energy. Life is, leaving me listless. Or my weight, as you were describing earlier, my weight I can't control it. I can't knock it off, or it's going up. And you go to the doctor and you say, I hate to say this to you, doc, because I know these symptoms are so vague. I'm gaining weight. My hair doesn't seem right. The doctor says, stop. I think I know what this could be. And the tests that doctors take for this are very, very easy to do. Every doctor knows how to check a TSH. They know how to check antibodies. It's a very simple test, and the treatments are fairly simple too.
And speaking of Your Body in Balance, you actually have an event coming up based off of the book as well. This one focusing on diabetes. It actually begins tomorrow night. This is pretty exciting.
It is. We're going to do a 3-week quick seminar on diabetes and how to choose foods to get your diabetes under the best control it's ever been. And you'll see information there at pcrm.org. We've got lots of information. I think it's pcrm.org/events, if I'm remembering correctly.
Precisely.
And everybody who participates gets a free copy of Your Body in Balance.
There you go. Can't beat that. Okay, time now to open up the doctor's mailbag. So go ahead and make sure that you submit your question in the comment section now, or hit us up on social media using the hashtag ExamRoomLive. Dr. Barnard, our first question comes to us from Sean on Instagram. Great story here. I've been vegan for about a year and have lost a lot of weight. Matter of fact, I'm no longer obese and my insulin sensitivity has improved with my type 1 diabetes. I feel great, but my white blood cell count has dropped a little bit. Could this be caused by eating a plant-based diet? I've heard that this might have happened with other vegans as well.
Okay. Well, first of all, congratulations. And there are several things that you mentioned. Number one, you followed a healthy diet. Your insulin sensitivity is better. That's great. But the surprise is that you've got not type 2 diabetes, you got type 1. And you may have heard us describe, we recently published a paper on type 1 diabetes. This is what used to be called childhood onset diabetes, where you still need to take insulin, but the amount that you need often goes way down when people follow a completely low-fat plant-based diet. If you got type 2 diabetes, which is the more common kind, people do terrific with that. They often get off their medications or are able to reduce their amount. So that's great. Now you said though that your white blood count went down. Well, keep in mind, white blood cells are cruising around in the blood to attack viruses and to attack bacteria, attack things that don't belong there. And if your white blood cell count has come down, what that normally means is that you're following a healthy diet. There aren't as many things that are there attacking you. Now, if it is on the lab test slip, there are normal values. And if you're way below the normal level, then your doctor's going to want to see if there's something else going on. But it is extremely common when people are on really clean diets to have a lower white blood cell count. That's totally normal, nothing to worry about. If your white blood cell count is really high, that's when your doctor thinks, good heavens, you must have an infection or something like that. So a low normal white blood cell count is not a cause for alarm.
Next question comes to us from Sarah on Facebook. Let's see if we can knock a few of these out pretty quickly here. What effect does alcohol have on diabetes? If I give up my daily glass of wine, what might happen to my blood sugar?
You might get low in the middle of the night. You have a glass of wine at 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, and the wine can make you have a low blood sugar in the middle of the night. You cut out the wine, that's less likely to happen.
All right. This one comes to us at 1210 from Tejas Sweeney. Wants to know, are smoothies fine despite their high sugar content?
You put your finger right on it. If you're drinking your calories, some people are going to gain weight with the smoothies. And if that is you, you might do well to have a more dilute smoothie or stick to solid foods.
All right. Lisa has a good question here. Wants to know, how do you handle a person who is convinced that the keto diet is the best diet?
Yes, this is the modern world, isn't it? There's so much hype for different diets, and the ketogenic diet just won't die. It's come back and forth under different names. It was the Atkins diet, and then it was the South Beach diet, and then ketogenic diets, and so forth. I think what happens is that people often do lose weight with them, and that's understandable because the diet says don't eat any fruit, don't eat bread, don't eat beans, don't eat pasta, don't eat cake, don't eat all these. You're leaving out so many foods that people will often lose weight. Here's the problem. If what you're leaving behind is meat or gravy or those kinds of things, and if you increase your consumption of those so that your total calorie intake doesn't drop, you don't lose any weight. But even worse, because those foods are unhealthy foods, cholesterol levels very often rise. And so over the long run, we're really quite concerned about people on these diets. Number one, ketogenic diets and low-carb diets in general do not cause better weight loss than, say, a healthy plant-based diet. And they do cause a lot worse cholesterol level for many people. So I would skip it.
All right. And final question, Dr. Barnard. I really want for you to take your time and think about this answer before you give it. This one comes to us from Stephanie at 1204. She writes, it's the Tuesday after Labor Day. Does that mean that we can decorate for Halloween?
Okay. Can you decorate for Halloween? I think you probably can. What you're going to have to think about is if there are any ghosts and goblins in your neighborhood are coming out. I don't know if there are with COVID anymore, but if they are, give them something healthy.
There you go. All right. If we did not get to your question today, we will save it and try to get you an answer on an upcoming episode. So before we wrap things up today, I will say on a more serious note that we actually need your help. Matter of fact, we want to see if we can help you at the same time. Research has suggested that plant-based diets, especially those that are rich in soybeans, can reduce hot flashes. We were just talking about your body imbalance. This is something that's covered in the book as well. Now, we are putting that to the test with a 12-week study, and we are looking for women who are experiencing hot flashes to take part. And all you need to do to apply to be part of this study is head to pcrm.org/hot flashes. Qualified participants will be given a slew of nutrition information and get to take some cooking classes, and there will be group support online with physicians and dietitians. Again, you can apply at pcrm.org/hot flashes. And Dr. Barnard, speaking of this and your body imbalance, getting the opportunity to interview one of the women who was featured in the book and was just going through hot flashes and just the heart-wrenching story that she told, it was really quite remarkable, the improvement that she was able to experience after changing her diet and incorporating soy specifically.
There have been so many people who you have hot flashes all day long. They're uncomfortable. They're sometimes embarrassing. You feel rotten. And then at night, in some cases, they're even worse, where you're waking up hour after hour after hour, just not getting a good night's sleep and never feeling like yourself. There is a fair amount of evidence that diet changes can help, and soybeans seem to be part of that solution, but it needs to be put to a good test. That's what we're doing.
All right, man. Let's put it to the test. PCRM.org/hot flashes. Dr. Barnard, I appreciate your time today, my friend.
Sure. Well, thank you, Chuck.
All right. And as a reminder, there is a brand new episode of the Exam Room podcast out today. So head over to Apple Podcast or Spotify, wherever you get your favorite shows from. Hit that subscribe button when you look for the Exam Room podcast by the Physicians Committee. And if you would be so kind as to also leave a 5-star rating, we would greatly appreciate it. That's going to wrap things up for us today to kick off the shortened week here on the Exam Room Live. My thanks to the crew behind the scenes that makes the magic happen, and of course to Dr. Neil Barnard for joining us as well. On behalf of everyone here at the Physicians Committee, I am the weight loss champion, Chuck Carroll. Thanks so much for watching, and until tomorrow, please remember to stay safe, take a stand, and keep it plant-based.